I had to play this ruthless game to save my sister from our terrible family after being mistreated and kicked out at 17. Since every choice I make now will affect not just my life but also my sister's future, I, a 25F, feel compelled to relate my tale. This time has been planned for years, and now that it has arrived, I need advice to ensure that I don't make a mistake. Living in Pine Grove as a child was like being in a separate reality than what you see on television. It's the sort of area where children learn to count by counting the empty bottles of their parents, and ambulance sirens are your nightly lullaby. When my parents gave birth to me, they were hardly teenagers. Both parents had no business parenting a child, and mom was 16 and dad was 18. We lived in a dilapidated 2-room apartment in the Riverside complex, which ought to have been demolished decades ago. Because the walls were so thin, you could hear everything, including drug sales, domestic arguments, and the cries of infants at 3 in the morning. Due to unpaid expenses, we frequently lost heat over the winter. Early on, I discovered that it was best to sleep in layers, starting with my school clothes, followed by my weekend attire, and finally, any outerwear I could locate at the nearby donation center. Although the journey to school was an experience in and of itself, school was my haven. In order to tidy up any mess from the previous evening, I would get up at 5 in the morning. Sometimes it was vomit from mom's awful night, and other times it was broken glass from dad's most recent outburst. When permission sheets needed to be signed and both parents were unconscious, I had to learn how to precisely forge their signatures, which I did by the time I was 7 years old. My elementary school teachers made subtle attempts to assist. Every day, Mrs. Martinez would inadvertently pack an extra lunch. When my shirt got too soiled, the janitor, Mr. Wilson, would leave his closet open so I could get a fresh one. Miss Brady always managed to have socks in my size in her lost and found cabinet. In retrospect, I saw that they were all attempting to establish a safety net without drawing notice from my parents or the police. Not all of the other children were nice. They would ridicule my outfits from charity stores or the fact that I would stuff my pockets full of cafeteria food for supper. To be honest though, it was easier to deal with their cruelty than their sympathy. I could at least defend myself with contempt. Sympathy only made me feel powerless. When I reached 15, everything changed. I was able to secure employment at our neighborhood grocery store, Wilson's Market. I met Mrs. Thompson, the store manager there, and she would end up being my lifeline to another world. A middle-aged woman with salt and pepper hair and cardigans adorned with cat pins, she didn't look particularly noteworthy. I couldn't see it in myself, but she saw something in me. It was difficult during those initial weeks at Wilson's. I was attempting to conceal the injuries from Dad's bad days while juggling work, school, and my personal life. Mrs. Thompson began assigning me to extra shifts whenever she saw the bruises, but she never inquired about them directly. While we worked together, she would teach me about bookkeeping, customer service, and inventory management. More significantly though, she would share with me tales of her time in college, her trips, and a world outside of Pine Grove. She taught me how to build credit, balance a checkbook, and make future plans, things no one else had bothered to explain. "Ashley," she would add, "you have more potential in your little finger than most people have. Never listen to someone who tells you otherwise." I created my first bank account with her help. Neither of my parents had ever had a step, so it was a big step. I meticulously recorded my earnings and spending in a notebook that I concealed beneath a loose floorboard in my room, making sure to preserve every dime I could. Even though it felt like an unattainable ambition at the time, Mrs. Thompson assisted me with starting a tiny college fund. Then the news that would alter everything arrived. Mom was expecting a child once more. Mom wandered into our small kitchen as I was standing there attempting to rescue enough edible portions from a stale loaf of bread to prepare dinner. She was crying this time, but she was high as usual. She said, "I'm pregnant," as if she were making a weather-related remark. "Your father's going to be pissed." My stomach sank with my heart. Asterisk. Not another child in this hell asterisk was all that was on my mind. That evening, I printed out information packets that I knew my parents would never read and used the library computer to explore adoption agencies. Dad warned me to keep my mouth shut and threw a beer bottle at the wall when I attempted to bring up the subject of adoption. It was a difficult pregnancy. I tried desperately to stop Mom from using, but she persisted. I would conceal her narcotics, only to uncover fresh caches. After pouring out the alcohol, I would return home to find fresh bottles. I made an anonymous call to social services, but it was unsuccessful. Pregnant addicts were not unusual in our community. Lily battled withdrawal symptoms for the first 2 weeks after birth in the NICU. Every day after work and school I went to see her, sitting next to her incubator and observing her small body trembling. At that point, I vowed to do whatever it needed to have at least one person on this baby's side. I began working 2 jobs, The Sunrise Diner on the weekends and Wilson's after school on weekdays. I put every dime into my secret account that wasn't used for really necessary expenses. I learned how to stretch my money and make emergency plans from Mrs. Thompson, who also assisted me with budgeting. We both understood it was just her way of helping me buy things for Lily, but she even made a special employee discount for baby stuff. My resolve to get us both out grew along with Lily. I would get up at 4 a.m. to study before school, work until it was time to go, and then come home to look after Lily. 3 hours of sleep and cold coffee became my go-to fuel. In fact, my grades went up. Desperation and resentment are strong motivators. However, secrets cannot be kept in a tiny community, particularly from addicts who are constantly seeking their next hit. My parents became aware that I consistently had money for Lily's necessities, such as clothes, formula, and diapers. They started requesting an increasing amount of my wages. Dad would slur, "Family helps family," obstructing my way to my room. "We need that money for bills." However, I had witnessed far too many of my earlier contributions become small plastic bags and empty bottles. I began lying about my pay, claiming that my hours had been reduced and that business was slow. When Mom arrived at Wilson's during my shift and yelled about unappreciative kids and family devotion, the facade fell apart. Mom was too far gone for Mrs. Thompson's attempts to defuse the situation. She said Mrs. Thompson was taking advantage of me, knocked over displays, and threatened to call the labor board. They phoned the cops. It was embarrassing. Everything came apart that night. When I got home, Dad was waiting for me, itching for a fight and more inebriated than normal. "Your mother says you've been lying about money," he snarled as he swayed in the corridor. "We have bills to pay with that money. I'll repay you if you give it to me." I declined. I stood my ground for the first time in my life. "That money is for Lily," I responded, attempting to maintain a level voice. "I've witnessed the fate of the funds I give you. I'm finished." Chaos ensued. Dad began hurling my belongings onto the front lawn while yelling about unappreciative kids and familial responsibilities. Lily was crying and reaching for me as Mom stood in the doorway. The neighbors hurriedly averted their gazes after peeking through their blinds. It was better to overlook family drama in our area. I was 17 years old when I stood with 2 garbage bags of stuff in our front yard, which was littered with rubbish, and I saw my baby sister cry for me through the window. My dreams are continually plagued by that sight. Fortunately, I was taken in by my friend Jessica's family. Despite their own lack of wealth, they made room in their modest 3-bedroom home on the opposite side of town. Mrs. Rivera, Jessica's mother, assisted me in submitting financial assistance and scholarship applications. Her father used their old station wagon to teach me how to drive. They merely required that I maintain good grades and assist with domestic duties. They never asked for rent. I learned what a true family looked like from living with the Riveras. During their family dinners, there was genuine conversation rather than argumentation. Rather than fighting when intoxicated, they used baked cakes to celebrate birthdays. Yes, they had issues, but rather than burying them in drugs and bottles, they dealt with them together. However, Lily remained enmeshed in upheaval while I was at last finding stability. On occasion, I would spot her at the playground or on her way to school. She was developing too quickly. Her clothing, which were either church donations or hand-me-downs from neighbors, were usually too big or too little. Whenever I could, I would give her money and teach her to conceal it in her stuffed animal so our parents wouldn't notice. Our covert emissary was Mrs. Thompson. When Lily visited the business, she would offer her free treats and update me on her health. Mrs. Thompson would tell me, "She's got your spirit." When we checked in once a week. "She shares your intelligence. She is surviving." It wasn't enough to survive. I wanted Lily to be successful. With newfound vigor, I pushed myself into my studies. My SAT results gave me access to opportunities I never would have imagined. I sobbed for hours after receiving the acceptance letter from State University along with a full scholarship offer. I couldn't just drive back on the weekends because it was 6 hours away, which was probably for the best. The distance would allow me to concentrate on my objective, which was to create a secure existence so that I could finally save Lily. It was a culture shock at college. Being from a wealthy suburb, my roommate didn't understand why I had 3 jobs and a full school load. While I was scrounging money to send home to Lily via Mrs. Thompson, my classmates grumbled about their parents not purchasing them new cars. I minored in business administration while majoring in finance. I felt like I was getting closer to my objective with each class. I gained knowledge about estate planning, taxes, and investing. I began to learn how money actually worked, not just how to get it, but also how to use it to my advantage. I was able to secure an internship at a prominent investing firm during my junior year. For their entry-level jobs, The starting pay was higher than my parents' combined highest earnings during their prime. I put in more effort than everybody else. I arrived early and stayed late. I immediately accepted their offer of a full-time job following graduation. My existence now, 8 years after I was kicked out of my childhood home, would have looked unthinkable to my adolescent self. My home is in a nice neighborhood. I have a good savings account and a steady work with perks. I never have to check my financial balance before making a grocery purchase, and I drive a dependable car. But without Lily, none of it mattered. Now that she is 11, Mrs. Thompson informs me that things have only gotten worse at home. Mom switched from medications to more difficult substances. Due to DUIs, Dad has been in and out of jail. In only the last year, they had been evicted 3 times. No one has bothered to report them, which is the only reason they haven't lost custody. That will soon change. I've been recording everything for years, including every instance of intoxication, missing school days, and instances where they used their rent money to buy narcotics. Mrs. Thompson has documented instances of neglect that she has seen. Jessica's mother has kept track of the occasions when Lily has arrived at their home underdressed or famished. I've spoken with family law specialists. I'm ready, even though I know the process will be messy. Now that I have the means, I can battle for custody and provide Lily with the security she needs. However, I want to approach this intelligently. I therefore require guidance. I intend to show them my accomplishment by inviting them to my home. My parents are people I know. They react exclusively to manipulation and money. They will want a portion of what I have once they see it. I'm relying on their avarice. I can already envision how it will transpire. Like they attempted to embezzle my teenage earnings, they will attempt to move in and take advantage of my success. However, I will be establishing the conditions this time. When they won't go, I'll give them a choice: either help with Lily's voluntary custody transfer, or I'll throw all I've got at CPS and the courts. I want to know if anyone has done something similar effectively. It may sound calculating, but I've studied the most skilled manipulators. To save my sister, I must play their game, but I want to do it well. This is the culmination of my entire existence. This was the reason for every extra shift, late-night study session, every dollar saved. I will never let Lily down again. I'll provide updates as events unfold. Update 1, I appreciate all of your help and guidance. Even though I took action today, I'm still analyzing what transpired. My former neighborhood was my first stop. It seemed unreal to traverse those well-known cracked sidewalks. It was like viewing a film of my former existence. Children were still using deflated basketballs to play on the street. Mothers were still shouting from paint-peeled windows. It was the same ice cream truck that was traveling about with its broken music. At Wilson's Market, training a teenage girl who looked so much like me at her age, Mrs. Thompson was right where I expected her to be. Even though she has arthritis and is in her 60s, she still wears those cat pins and stands erect. Everything I had practiced crumbled when our gazes locked across the store. "Look who finally learned to use a comb," she replied, using an old joke to diffuse the situation. She kept an extra hairbrush in her office for my more hectic mornings when I was 15. We ended up having a conversation during her lunch break in her office. That old coffee machine, which sounds like a dying automobile engine, is still with her. She told me everything I hadn't heard. Since she turned 11, Lily has worked at Joe's Diner. Off the books, of course. Mrs. Thompson handed her a hollow book, in which she keeps all of her money. It seems that my survival skills, including my previous coping mechanisms for our parents' difficult times, were passed down to my sister. She's smart about it, according to Mrs. Thompson. Smarter than you were, even. Lily has an entire network of locations she can turn to when things become tough at home, and she conceals a prepaid phone in her school locker. The children of the neighbors believe she is simply hosting frequent sleepovers. Mrs. Thompson then produced a hefty envelope made of manila. She stated, "I've been keeping records. Times, dates, and incidents. Each time your parents arrived intoxicated or intoxicated. Each time Lily showed up with strange bruises or hunger. Each time they made an attempt to steal or create a scene. This is what the other store owners have been doing. In the same way that they attempted to protect me, the entire community has been covertly defending my sister. At the convenience shop, Mr. Chin allows her to complete her homework in his back room. Instead of discarding damaged books, Mira Rodriguez from the library saves them for her. Old Joe from the diner even tells the health inspector that she is his niece while slipping her additional food. The most difficult aspect was going to my parents' place. With peeling paint, missing shingles, and a yard full of enigmatic stains, the building appeared to have aged decades in a matter of years. By the steps, a broken tricycle that I had never seen before was rusting. It was like a thunderclap when it knocked. With her hair unkempt and a cigarette hanging down, Mom opened the door. When she first saw the suit, the pearls, and the leather bag, she didn't recognize me. In a matter of seconds, her gaze changed from skeptical to perplexed to astonished. "Get out here, Frank," she muttered. "Holly." At 2 p.m., Dad staggered to the door with a drink in his hand. He had lost more teeth and put on weight. His eyes immediately went to my watch, my backpack, and my car parked in front of the street as the recognition dawned on him more slowly. Like a weird stranger, which I was in many respects, they invited me in. I didn't see any cats, but the house smelled like cat poop. A road of empty bottles led to the couch. Mom began to pick things up frantically, as though it would make up for years of neglect. The start of their conversation was the true shock. They pretended that the past had never occurred, that they had never expelled me, and that they had always encouraged my success. While starting another cigarette, Mom remarked, "We always knew you had it in you. Your father's side is the source of your business acumen." I gave them space to speak while I watched them create an alternate world in which they were happy, encouraging parents. Dad kept bringing up bills, giving away that he was having money problems. Mom continued talking about how families should stay together and how lonely I must be in the big city. Everything else vanished when Lily got home. With her rucksack clasped like a shield, she stood in the doorway and gazed at me as though she were seeing a ghost. Despite growing taller, she is still too skinny and is dressed in clothing that was worn out 3 years ago. "I promised," was my only response. She ran to me, dropping her backpack. As our parents awkwardly stared, presumably trying to figure out how to make the most of this reunion, we held each other. I left shortly after that. I set the hook before I went, but I made up an excuse about a work call. I announced my large 5-bedroom suburban home, invited everyone to come over this weekend and saw money signs light up their eyes. I gave Lily a burner phone and gave her instructions to keep it hidden in a whisper. I didn't have enough money to go on a major binge, but I did have enough to make sure our parents would be there on Saturday. I looked at Lily in my rearview mirror as I drove off. Holding the concealed phone like a lifeline, she stood on the porch. "Little sister, only a couple more days. We have a few days left before this game is officially over. On Saturday, the second stage begins. The documents have already been prepared by my attorney. If necessary, Mrs. Thompson and half the community are prepared to testify. Let us first examine the extent to which our parents' avarice will lead them along this garden path that I have constructed. If you would like to hear what comes next, please let me know. This weekend is when the real show begins." Update 2. The family visit became something I never would have imagined. A clear demonstration of why I must remove Lily from the house immediately. At 10 a.m., I picked them up in my SUV. Mom had really tried, sporting a dress that I'm fairly certain she stole from Target, with the price tag still partially visible beneath her arm. Dad was dressed in the same rumpled shirt and tie he usually wears to DUI hearings. Lily was dressed in her cleanest possession, her school uniform. It was a weird drive. Dad continued saying that I was just as good with money as he was, while Mom kept remarking on every posh building we passed. Sitting quietly in the back, Lily absorbed everything. Several times, I caught her gaze in the rearview mirror. She knew exactly what was going on. Mom actually let out a gasp as we arrived at my place. Although it is by no means a mansion, it might as well be in comparison to our former neighborhood. Dad immediately glanced at my neighbors' boats and their drives and began figuring out just how much he could borrow. Once we were inside, the real performance began. Mom started organizing her belongings right away. She remarked, "This living room is just perfect for my collection," alluding to the box of broken figurines she had owned since I was a child. Dad was measuring the garage in his mind and discussing how he could turn it into a workshop. I gave them the entire tour and played along. Their eyes became larger and their clues more potent with every room. Mom began discussing the sense of emptiness in the house and the desire for a familial touch. Dad was often talking about his handyman abilities and how he could actually keep up a property like this. Lunchtime was the tipping point. I had placed an order for simple catering, consisting of salads and sandwiches. I had a fancy assortment of wine, and Mom had 3 glasses. That's when she dropped the bomb, she insisted. She stumbled, "You know, we've been considering moving. Even though this neighborhood seems pleasant, you have so many empty rooms." Dad jumped right in. "We may assist with the expenses. Up here, I could make things better. You would no longer need to be by yourself." I was grinning on the inside, but I kept my look neutral. They were doing exactly what I had instructed. I told them I would give it some thought and get back to them the following week. They were almost pitiful in their excitement. When I was able to get Lily alone and showed her my home office while our parents were preoccupied picturing their future life in my living room, it was the most illuminating moment. As soon as the door shut, she started crying. She said, "They sold my bed last week, claimed to be in need of cash for bills, but they simply didn't have to complete. We were both aware of the money's whereabouts." She told me everything, including how she has been taking showers at school after her early morning job in the cafeteria, how they have been renting out a portion of the house to some pals who traffic drugs, and how she hasn't had hot water in months since the bills weren't paid. Downstairs, Mom was growing more inebriated and talking louder. She was definitely searching for more alcohol because I could hear her digging through my kitchen cabinets. While talking on the phone, Dad boasted about his daughter's accomplishments, her large home, and potential investment chances. When I saw Mom attempting to fit my silver candlesticks into her pocketbook, it was the last straw. She said she was merely staring at them when I challenged her. In an attempt to mediate the situation, Dad suggested that I give them a loan, only for the time being. That night, as I drove them home, I overheard Dad's aspirations to make the neighborhood better and Mom's inebriated intentions to redecorate my house. When I dropped them off, Lily gripped my hand and I gave her another burner phone because her previous one had magically vanished after our parents discovered it. I gave my lawyer a call that evening. The documents are prepared. They will discover exactly what sort of family reunion I have been organizing when they eventually call about moving in next week. Along with statements from Mrs. Thompson and the neighbors regarding their continued mistreatment of Lily, I have added all of the information from today to my file, including the attempted theft, the intoxicated behavior, and the disclosures of their present living circumstances. The trap is in place. They believe they are going to move in with me and take advantage of my prosperity. Rather, they will have to decide whether to relinquish custody of Lily or deal with the full weight of CPS and the criminal justice system. Even though I feel bad sometimes for being so calculated, I know I'm doing morally wrong when I see Lily's expression when she told me her bed had been sold. The encounter I've been preparing for years will be the final update. Update 3. Although the emotional toll was greater than I anticipated, the story's conclusion went just as planned. This is how it all transpired. As I had predicted, Mom called on Wednesday. Her talking to authority figures voice was an attempt to sound sober. As he does when he's anxious, Dad was on speakerphone, clearing his throat every few seconds. They, not me, wanted to talk about the possibility of a living arrangement. For a serious family conversation about their future, I invited them over. The bait was immediately taken. Over the phone, I could almost hear them giving each other high fives. On Thursday, they arrived with 2 suitcases an hour early. It would have been funny if it weren't so depressing. They were unaware that a CPS caseworker and my attorney were waiting in my home office. The manila files on my dining room table should have been the first clue that something wasn't right. As Dad began his rehearsed speech on family togetherness and supporting one another, Mom gave them an anxious look. I allowed them to speak for precisely 7 minutes, during which they made empty veiled attempts to gain entry into my house and made vows to clean up, obtain jobs, and be better parents. I opened the first folder after that. "Let's discuss the drug deals that took place in your living room last month," I remarked, referring to witness accounts and police files. "Or perhaps the 3 months of utilities that were not paid. Or should we talk about Lily's unexplained disappearance of school supplies?" It was almost funny how quickly their faces altered. Mom's phony smile broke. Dad's self-assured stance faltered. The proof of neglect, neighbor statements, school reports, strange injury records, Mrs. Thompson's comprehensive logs of their public intoxication, and testimonials from half the community regarding their continued drug use were all laid out by me. I pushed another folder forward and stated, "This is what's going to happen. These documents pertain to a custody transfer. All of this remains between us if you sign them, refuse, and the DA's office and CPS receive everything in these folders." Mom used her typical strategies, sobbing, begging, and saying they could change. Dad tried to make me feel bad about being loyal to the family. They turned to threats when that failed. Dad hissed, "You can't prove anything. Nobody will believe you." At that point I used my trump card. Using my laptop, I saw video records from the previous few months, including images from the security cameras of my neighbor's drug sales, fights while intoxicated, and neglect of Lily. Quietly, I murmured, "The DA will believe this. So will the judge." The ensuing hush was deafening. 3 hours were spent negotiating, threatening, crying, and ultimately resigning. The documents were signed by them. They were immediately notarized by my lawyer. I said, "Get out," after it was finished. "If you ever try to contact Lily without her consent, everything in these folders goes public." They didn't even ask to bid her farewell before leaving. They were attempting to bargain one last helping hand when they spoke about money. I refused to comply with their requests. That night, Lily moved in. Everything she owned had been stolen or sold, leaving her with just one backpack. She sobbed as she stood in her new room, which was her first actual bedroom since she was a toddler. Whispering, "Is it really over?" "Yes," I said, "it's really over." We went shopping for her first actual bed the following day. Everything was hers to choose, including the comforter, pillows and bedding. No more sharing a mattress on the floor with mom's friends or sleeping on a shabby couch. Mrs. Thompson joined us in celebrating this past weekend. She brought Lily's hollow book, which she had been using for years to conceal her money. We totaled her money, which came to $847.23. I assisted her in opening her first bank account and matched it dollar for dollar. Lily and I went to register for her new school yesterday. When the principal looked over her files, he was immediately astounded. Like her sister, Mrs. Thompson would say, in spite of everything? Our parents haven't made an effort to get in touch. Several times, their friends have contacted, most likely in search of their next score. All of their numbers were blocked. This time, the house feels better, fuller. Lily was watching TV in her room last night when I heard her laughing. Genuine laughter, not the apprehensive type we were taught to diffuse stressful circumstances. She asked if she could have a friend over this morning. I was moved to tears by such a simple plea. It's her first time hosting a friend, never invited them to a safe house. I want to express my gratitude to everyone who helped me get through this. When I doubted myself, your advice kept me strong. To anyone in a similar circumstance, keep track of everything, make your case, exercise patience, and above all, never give up. Lily is currently sleeping in her new room, bed, and actual house. She no longer has to worry about what she will wake up to for the first time in her life. We made it.
Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.
My brother ruined my life by fabricating evidence of my affairs, but after 6 years, the truth finally came out. My high school love, Rachel, was 45 years old and I, a 45-year-old guy, was her spouse. Together, we have 4 daughters. Ashley, 18, Olivia, 21, Madison, 22, and Lauren, 24. We fell in love when we were both 14 years old during our freshman year. I can still clearly recall our English class when I first met her. I assisted her in picking up the book she had dropped. It was our reality, but it seemed like something from an adolescent film. From the first time they laid eyes on Rachel, my parents, Robert, 68, and Pamela, 66, fell in love. She was their unborn daughter. Mom would teach her our family dishes and invite her over for Sunday dinners even when they were first dating. Dad gave us relationship advice all the time and treated her like his own daughter. He would say things like, "Think before making big decisions and communication is key." Our relationship was shaped by those statements for many years. This parting is made much more agonizing by the unique memories that each of my girls has. Our oldest, Lauren, was my shadow when she was younger. In the park close to our house, I spent numerous weekends teaching her how to ride a bike. Like the older children, she was determined to learn without the use of training wheels. Her delighted smile brightened the entire neighborhood when she eventually succeeded. As she had envisioned, she is now a prosperous lawyer. When Madison, our artistic soul, was 15, she converted our garage into her art studio. I constructed an easel and arranged her materials to assist her in setting it up. That area became her haven after we transformed it over the course of a summer. Our living room is adorned with a family portrait that she painted. It was her first significant composition. If it's still there, I wonder. The best part of my weekends was watching Olivia play soccer. Until I had to miss them all, I never missed a single one. When my mother contacted me at work to tell me that I had made the varsity team as a freshman, I could still hear her happy voice. She learned how to play for me, and we practiced penalty kicks in the backyard for hours. At games, she constantly claimed that I was her fortunate charm. My tiny coding partner was Ashley, my tech-savvy youngest child. When she was 10 years old, we worked together to build her first computer. We would work on basic games late into the night since she was so eager to learn programming. She came up with the concept for an app that would use puzzles to teach children math. When everything collapsed, we were halfway through the development process. Our first few years of marriage were both magical and difficult. During our senior year, we were both pleased and afraid to learn that Rachel was expecting Lauren. I chose to work at a nearby manufacturing company while attending night classes rather than enrolling in college right away. While raising Lauren, Rachel worked part-time to complete her degree. Despite barely making ends meet and living in a small one-bedroom apartment, we were content. We learned collaboration and resilience over those years. But my 43-year-old younger brother James was always a specter over our joy. I was too trusting to notice the signs properly, but they were there from the start. James would make excuses to be around us even in high school. He would offer to drop Rachel off at our favorite cafe on date nights or offer to drive her home while I had basketball practice. I now understand that James had a pattern of compulsive behavior. He followed his middle school teacher to the grocery store and sent her letters since he was obsessed with her before Rachel. It was dismissed by our parents as a harmless crush. He developed an obsession with a girl in his high school class, making up intricate tales about their connection when they had hardly spoken. It was written off as a teenage drama once more. When Rachel and I got engaged, it was the first big warning sign. James became furious rather than merely disapproving. When he arrived at Rachel's place of employment, he created a commotion that nearly cost her her job. He was yelling that I had taken her away from him and that they were destined to be together. Rachel was afraid. She told me everything right away, and that's when I started thinking about severing my relationship with James. However, my parents stepped in. They persuaded us that James needed assistance rather than rejection. We attended family therapy sessions for months. James expressed regret, claimed to have changed, and seemed to accept our relationship. Although I now question whether it was all part of his long-term plan, he even gave a heartfelt speech during our wedding. James became more and more involved in our life over time. He positioned himself as our children's favorite uncle, helped me land a job at his company, and started showing up at family get-togethers all the time. He was especially close to Madison and Lauren, frequently bringing them out and purchasing them pricey presents. I assumed he was simply making amends for his previous actions by being a good uncle. In hindsight, I can see how he methodically gained the trust of each member of my family. He supported Rachel's professional networking, helped my parents with their money, and was always ready to provide a helping hand. In contrast to my hectic schedule and frequent business travels, he positioned himself as the dependable, stable sibling. I needed the business travels to advance in my job, but James took advantage of me. Some of the things he would say to Rachel were, "Mike's always away, but I'm here if you need anything." While I was away, he offered to assist with school functions and home repairs. I was appreciative of his assistance at the moment. I can now understand that it was all a part of his deception. Everything broke apart 6 years ago. I had been at our company's West Coast office for a week on business. It was a presentation for a big project that might get you promoted. I missed Rachel and the girls so much that I contacted her every night to tell her everything that had happened during the day. I also participated in video conferences with the girls, listening to Madison's most recent art project ideas and providing remote assistance with Ashley's math assignments. My whole family was in our living room when I got home. James was there, appearing serious, while Rachel and the girls were crying. Tension was pervasive in the air. Rachel exclaimed, "How could you do this to us?" with a look of fury in her eyes that I will never forget. James had meticulously planned his attack. He pulled out a folder that seemed to be unquestionable proof of my adultery. Intimate text exchanges, hotel receipts, and even pictures of me entering a hotel with another woman were all there. He asserted that the woman was a coworker who, feeling guilty, had told him everything. The images were modified with skill. Later, I found out that they were staged to appear suspicious and were taken at official business meetings. Although the texts were entirely false, they contained information about my travel and work schedule that could only have been known by someone with insider knowledge. James had made things appear genuine by using his position at our organization. I made a valiant effort to protect myself, but long before I entered that room, James had turned everyone against me. He had been subtly hinting at my odd behavior to Rachel for weeks. My daughters had been persuaded by him that I was behaving differently. He had even expressed his concern about my decisions to my parents. I'm still troubled by the nightmare of the next several hours. Lauren, who had always been my strongest supporter, yelled that she would never forgive me and hurled her house key at me. Even though Madison was crying so much that she was having trouble speaking, her words, "I hate you," were audible. My daughter Olivia, who used to race to me after every soccer match, was unable to even look at me. "Why did Daddy do this to us?" Ashley, who was only 12 at the time, turned to Rachel and questioned. The most agonizing response was probably from my parents. Dad, who had taught me everything I needed to know to be a decent spouse and father, and who had always been proud of me, looked at me with utter disgust. His statement, "No son of mine would do this to his family," is still ringing in my mind. You would end this divorce quickly and amicably if you still had any dignity. That evening, I was expelled with only a bag of clothing. In the weeks that followed, I made frantic efforts to establish my innocence. I spent almost all of my savings on hiring 3 different private investigators. After weeks of searching for the supposed other woman, the first private investigator found that she had moved to a different state. Despite identifying several discrepancies, the second investigator was unable to demonstrate that the hotel invoices were fakes. In fact, the third PI nearly discovered James's manipulation before abruptly and mysteriously abandoning the case. James had threatened his family. I found out later. The divorce process was harsh and swift. Rachel was furious and distraught and didn't want to interact with me. My daughters blocked my social media accounts and phone number. I only made contact through attorneys. I lost everything in 6 months, including my work, most of my friends, my home, and my family. At the office, James had been deliberately spreading accusations that I had a history of having inappropriate connections with coworkers. The stigma followed me, and clients began asking not to work with me, even though nothing was formal. I started again after moving to a little apartment across town. The isolation was debilitating. Sometimes all I wanted was a glimpse of my girls, so I would sit in my car outside my former home. Every milestone I missed was like a stab to my heart. I couldn't get close, so I watched Lauren's law school graduation from the parking lot. I sent Madison an anonymous purchase of her favorite piece from her first art show. I cheered alone in my flat while watching Olivia's college soccer championships on the internet. I learned about Ashley's successes in the science fair from the local newspaper. However, nothing could have prepared me for Lauren's wedding's agony. Through a social media post from a common acquaintance, I became aware of it. I lost my role in my moment when I saw James escorting my daughter down the aisle in the pictures. I was in a dark place all day thinking about things I'm not proud of. At that point, I picked up my cat, Max, from the neighborhood shelter. To be honest, he saved my life more than once, and he needed someone just as much as I did. My only means of escape became work. I shifted departments, switched companies, and threw myself fully into my job. I received 2 promotions, but without my family to celebrate with, accomplishment felt meaningless. My background was unknown to the new employer, yet I was never able to build strong bonds with my coworkers. How do you justify not talking about your family, eating lunch by yourself, or going to office parties? Over the years, I made a few unsuccessful attempts at dating. I was never sure how to respond to the first question, which was always about family. How can you explain to someone that your children despise you, that your brother methodically ruined your life, and that your whole family thinks you're a cheater? Most first dates ended without a second date. Every holiday served as a reminder of my losses. Thanksgiving meant consuming just microwave meals. Christmas was spent drinking too much and viewing old home videos. My girls and my own birthdays were the worst. Because I couldn't stand to see the unopened presents in my apartment, I continued to buy them presents each year and kept them in a storage unit. Then everything changed 3 days ago. An unidentified number called me. My mother was crying. Although she refused to provide anything over the phone, she said that they had learned the truth about James's deceit. She pleaded with me to meet with them, stating that everyone wanted to make amends and was remorseful. Feeling numb, I hung up. 6 years of loneliness, suffering, and memories lost. My daughters spent 6 years growing up without their father. James lived the life he had stolen from me for 6 years. That cannot be resolved by a simple apology. I've made touch with a legal practice that focuses on defamation and family law disputes. The attorney thinks we may have a good case, particularly if my family now has proof of James's dishonesty. Reconciliation is not something I'm interested in. Justice is what I desire. I want James to be held legally responsible for ruining my life. Some may believe that my family should forgive me because I'm being too harsh. James didn't simply betray my confidence, though. My whole life was methodically ruined by him. He poisoned my girls against me, took away my fatherly position, and robbed me of years I will never get back. How can you forgive someone who denied you the opportunity to watch your kids grow up? Who caused you to miss the wedding of your daughter? Who deliberately and methodically turned your whole family against you? I'm meeting with the attorneys tomorrow to go over our alternatives. My mom asked for a meeting, but I haven't replied yet. Although I have mixed feelings about it, I would like to know how they found the truth. The harm has been done. I'll provide an update as soon as I learn more. I have to prioritize the legal issues and preserve my own emotional well-being throughout this time. Update 1. My parents just presented me with startling proof at my meeting with my legal team. These are the events of the past 2 days. It was eye-opening to meet with my lawyers. They clarified that based on the information my parents gave, James might be charged with several crimes. My mother gave me a big folder with the original, unaltered pictures, which make it obvious how James altered them. Along with bank statements demonstrating payments for fabricating hotel receipts, they also found email exchanges between James and a professional photo editing firm. During a drunken confrontation with Rachel last week, the truth was revealed in a surprising way. By declaring he didn't design all of this simply to lose her, James unintentionally made a mistake. Rachel began investigating after reading this message and discovered a hidden email account on their shared computer. Everything was in the emails. Correspondence with several individuals he hired to assist him. Complete records of his 6-year plan to ruin my life, and even early drafts of the fictitious texts he wrote. Significant progress has been made in the police investigation. James's co-conspirators, including the friend who assisted in making fictitious hotel reservations and the photo editor, have previously been interviewed. By testifying against James, these people are now assisting the authorities in the hopes of avoiding being charged themselves. James's scrupulous record-keeping is especially unsettling. On his laptop, Rachel found a password-protected journal, which she gave to my lawyers. He started planning even before my marriage to Rachel, according to the journal. He spent a lot of time writing about waiting for the right time to carry out his plan. After learning that James intimidated other co-workers and utilized resources to falsify proof in order to support his lies, my former company opened an internal inquiry. Compensation for wrongful firing is being seriously discussed, and the HR department is getting ready to issue a formal apology. The evidence is growing. Experts in forensics discovered erased documents that demonstrated he had attempted similar schemes twice previously but had not carried them out correctly. The degree of forethought is astounding. Rachel is completely assisting investigators and has filed for divorce from James. The worst thing has been discovering how he took advantage of my daughters. His journal entries describe how he poisoned them against me in a methodical manner. He would deliberately sow doubts, misrepresent my statements, and fabricate circumstances to cast me in a negative light. One of Ashley's pals was even paid by him to say they had seen me with another woman. More evidence was found during today's police search on James's office. They discovered USB disks with backup copies of his falsified evidence, several burner phones, and more counterfeit documents he hadn't yet utilized. In order to keep up his network of falsehoods, they also found a list of the persons he was blackmailing. Considering the severity and length of his offenses, my attorneys are certain that they will seek the harshest punishments possible. According to them, James might be sentenced to up to 15 years in prison and could be awarded millions of dollars in civil damages. They have recommended me to forego all communication with my family for the time being, stating that everything must go through the appropriate legal procedures. Another victim has been identified during the investigation. James planned a similar plot against his college roommate and the roommate's girlfriend 20 years earlier. This former victim got in touch with my attorneys to tell his experience after learning about my case. I'm continuing to concentrate on the court case rather than any possible family reconciliation. We're filing the civil complaint tomorrow, and the grand jury hearing is next week. Now, it's important to make sure James bears the full repercussions of his conduct. When there are noteworthy developments in the court case, I'll provide an update. Update 2, the legal process is moving more quickly than anticipated. I need to share a few significant changes that have happened since my last report. James was taken into custody at his place of employment yesterday morning. He was overheard making calls about erasing evidence, which an employee immediately reported to the police and the company's security. He attempted to remove files from his work computer as he was being arrested, but everything had already been secured by the IT department. His response to being caught was telling. He remarked, "She was supposed to be mine anyway," without refuting anything. Today, the grand jury indictment was delivered. They returned their decision in less than 2 hours since the evidence was so strong. In her 20 years of experience, the prosecutor described it as one of the most blatant instances of planned hatred she has ever witnessed. James's actual character eventually came to light during police questioning. He sobbed uncontrollably and disclosed more information about his obsession. He had apparently been surreptitiously filming Rachel for years, gathering thousands of hours of video from covert cameras in their home. This is being handled by the police as a distinct criminal surveillance case. An even more alarming discovery came from the company's internal investigation. James had been embezzling money to finance his plan. He created fictitious vendor accounts and had been embezzling money for years to cover the costs of the different individuals he employed to assist in fabricating the evidence against me. Separate charges are now being pressed by the firm. There have been conflicting responses from my daughter to these disclosures. Lauren has been going over all the evidence because she is a lawyer. We spoke directly for the first time in 6 years when she called me today. At first, she was unable to talk through her emotions. When she was able to speak, she described how James had played on everyone's anxieties and vulnerabilities in a unique way. James had offered to help sell some of her artwork, But Madison found that it was actually stashed away in a storage facility he rented. To keep her financially reliant on him, he had been taking her work and lying to her about it. She is pursuing separate theft accusations. Olivia discovered tapes of James paying her college soccer coach to bench her during crucial matches that I might have attended. He wanted to make sure that I couldn't use sports to get back in touch with her. The NCAA is currently investigating the matter on its own. Ashley's admission was the most devastating. She discovered journal entries in which James described how, prior to everything collapsing, he purposely ruined the coding project we were working on. Knowing how important that shared interest was to our relationship, he had paid someone to hack and contaminate our work. Additional evidence has been discovered during Rachel's divorce procedures. He had been concealing substantial assets, including real estate bought under false pretenses, according to their joint tax forms. Even before our divorce, the forensic accountants were able to track down money transactions to offshore accounts. The extent of James's deceit has crushed my parents. When Dad found out about the concealed cameras in their home, he also suffered a little heart attack. James had been watching every member of the family, gathering information that he could use to control them. He kept records on everyone's vulnerabilities, secrets, and intimate moments. Today, the report from the criminal psychologist was made public. According to the report, James has one of the worst cases of obsessive personality disorder and psychopathic tendencies they have ever seen. According to his notebooks, he carefully planned every aspect of the devastation of my life, viewing it as an art form. Victims from the past have kept coming forward. Similar methods from James's background have been reported by 2 other families, though they are not as complex as what he did to me. These incidents, which date back to his time in college, demonstrate a distinct pattern of worsening conduct. Given the evidence that James had established a tiny network of blackmailed people who assisted him in maintaining his deceit, the prosecutor is now attempting to bring additional organized crime charges against James. Some were people he had financially compromised, and others were other professionals he had snuck on. I've kept my distance from efforts at family reconciliation in favor of assisting in the development of the most compelling legal argument. My attorneys claim that with the overwhelming amount of evidence, James's conviction is all but certain. Now their attention is on making sure he gets the harshest punishment imaginable. Although the tale has garnered media interest, I have turned down every invitation to be interviewed. I'm still focused on pursuing justice within the judicial system rather than going public. Nevertheless, a number of James's accomplices have begun speaking with reporters, exposing the entire scope of his network of deception. Next week, following the preliminary hearing, I'll provide another update. I'm currently preparing for what is expected to be a historic case in criminal justice and family law with my legal team. The conclusions of the preliminary hearing are more important than anyone could have predicted. I wanted to hold off on sharing this update until everything was finalized. Although James entered a guilty plea to all charges, the events in the courtroom were surprising. Against the advice of his attorney, he insisted on making a public statement. He described his entire plan for 45 minutes, not with regret but with a sickening sense of pride. He expressed no remorse, calling it his masterpiece of revenge. The judge's response was extraordinary. She disregarded the usual sentence criteria after hearing James's statement, pointing to his pathological pride and obvious determination to commit another crime. In order to run each count consecutively rather than concurrently, she imposed the maximum penalty. James will be imprisoned for 25 years with no chance of release for 18 of those years. James provided fresh details about additional victims throughout his statement, going beyond the incidents we were already aware of. In other states, he had tried similar tactics against 3 other families. His crimes may result in federal prosecution, according to the FBI's interstate investigation. His offshore accounts were the most startling discovery. He had been operating a consulting business for other compulsive people, teaching them how to ruin relationships and families, the forensic accountants found out. He had customers in several different nations. Now, Interpol is involved. In her testimony, Rachel described discovering a secret chamber in their basement that was stocked with monitors and monitoring gear. In addition to monitoring their home, he had set up cameras in my office, apartment, and even my vehicle. It was military-grade surveillance technology, according to the technical expert who inspected the arrangement. Ashley, my youngest daughter, made significant progress in her analysis of James's computer systems. She discovered encrypted files using her coding expertise, demonstrating that he had been preparing to grow his scam. He had meticulous records on the families of my co-workers, ready to ruin several relationships at once if I ever came close to establishing my innocence. The company's security mechanisms were completely redesigned as a result of their analysis. They found that James had used persuasion and extortion to undermine almost every department. In his own testimony, The CEO described discovering proof that James had been selling company secrets to finance his complex schemes. As an attorney, Lauren has been assisting the prosecution in constructing cases for James's other victims. She discovered a trend that went all the way back to his high school years. He had spent more than 25 years honing his craft. He had developed a network of enablers during his life, according to her inquiry. Betrayal Shadow, an exhibition at Madison's art gallery, showcased pieces she produced while dealing with this experience. She openly challenged a number of James's collaborators who were there at the event without their knowledge. Video recordings of their confessions served as proof for further charges. Olivia found out that James had been following her college friends, gathering damaging material to keep them quiet. She is currently developing procedures to stop similar manipulation schemes in college athletics by collaborating with school security across the country. Our family's psychological effects have resulted in an unforeseen development. Numerous prestigious colleges are examining the case as an illustration of persistent psychological manipulation. In order to improve detection and prevention tactics for incidents like this one, research teams are examining James's techniques. A support group for families impacted by pathological liars and manipulators has been established by my parents. They have discovered 5 further instances of James interfering in the lives of other families, some of which go back decades, thanks to this network. Due to these disclosures, a number of cold cases involving questionable family splits have been reopened. The judge combined compensatory and punitive penalties and sentenced James to pay $12 million in reparations. The forensic accountants discovered that he had accumulated more than $20 million from corporate espionage and consulting, all of which have been confiscated. In the future, I have turned down every attempt at reconciliation from my relatives. The years lost are irreparable, and the damage is too great. I'm concentrating on assisting in the construction of safeguards to stop similar exploitation from happening to others. James's law is now being considered by a number of state legislatures to strengthen the penalty for planned family destruction. I keep my anonymity intact, even though the story has garnered international attention. Rather, I'm developing tools to identify patterns of systematic familial manipulation in collaboration with cybersecurity professionals. Leading the technical development, Ashley is transforming our misery into something that could potentially benefit others. My last update will be this one. Although justice has been done, some wounds never completely go away. I'm going about my life with the intention of keeping others from going through what James did to our family.
Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.
My wife cheated with my cousin and had a baby. My family kept it secret for years, and now they want back into my life as I've found success. Please be patient with me as I explain this entire matter to my family because there is a lot of background involved. I'm a 44-year-old man who has been married for 10 years. My 41-year-old wife and I have been together for 13 years. We are content with our lives and have an 8-year-old kid as well. I have been married before though. I married at the age of 22, but regrettably, for reasons I'm still unclear, our marriage ended in divorce 3 years later. Since middle school, my ex-wife, who I'll call Amy, has been with me. We were essentially childhood lovers. We made the decision to be married as soon as we were out of college and had respectable careers. For the first few years, everything was good between us, but then, for some reason, things started to go strange. After that, I felt as though she was not interested at all, despite my best efforts to maintain the spark. A few weeks before our 3rd wedding anniversary, she handed me divorce papers and declared she was done, despite my best efforts to win her back. My goal was to improve our marriage. She was only able to tell me that she was no longer in love with me, which was all I wanted as an explanation for why we had to break up after all this time together. I was furious, but there was nothing I could do about it. Since I had no other choice and didn't want to prolong the divorce and make her even more unhappy by making her live with me, I made the decision to proceed. Because of the limited number of shared assets we had, the process was really simple. I never saw her again after that. After the divorce was finalized, she changed towns and shut off all communication, according to a few people I spoke with. Even my relatives stopped talking to me around the time of the divorce, which was incredibly odd, but this is usual. When I was going through a really trying time, they ought to have been there for me, but instead they began to distance themselves from me. I made a concerted effort to stay in contact with them once the divorce was finalized, but I discovered that I had been blocked everywhere. I even made a few attempts to go see them, but neither my sister nor my parents ever let me in. It all struck me hard because it was so weird and I was already going through a difficult period. I couldn't even bring myself to do anything for a few years following the divorce, so I quit my work and spent a few months at home without a job. But I'm really fortunate to have friends by my side who encouraged me to attempt to move on and do better even during such trying moments. After the divorce, my friends looked after me because my family was never there for me. I ultimately made the decision to open my own eatery. Although it had always been my ambition, I had put it off in order to accumulate sufficient funds because I also needed to consider Amy during our marriage. But because we were divorced, I made the decision to go ahead and do it alone. I also chose to call the restaurant the name my parents had recommended. My buddies helped me approach a few potential investors, secure their support, and begin developing a business plan. I opened my own restaurant a few years later. After the divorce, it took me about 4 years to get back on my feet. I met my current wife 2 years later. We started conversing after she told me she loved my restaurant at a function where we met through friends. I asked her to marry me after 3 years of dating because I wanted to give love another try. Here we are with our son 10 years later. My business life has also improved over the past few years, in addition to my personal life. In my career, I've done fairly well. It all began with a restaurant, but because of its success, we gradually started to grow. I am the CEO of my own hospitality firm at the moment, and we operate a chain of hotels and restaurants that are quite well liked. We intend to grow it even further in the hopes of gaining recognition outside of the state. I have put a lot of effort into getting to where I am now, but it has been a difficult journey. Since of this, I recently agreed to an interview since I felt it was an indication that I had truly made it. However, after seeing that interview on the television, my family decided to get in touch with me again, and I honestly had no clue that it would generate such a storm in my life. I didn't really think my family would have watched it because the channel that carried it was a somewhat popular one. Even if they had, I didn't think they would arrive at my workplace. My workplace's location isn't particularly discreet, so they must have had little trouble finding me. Still, it was highly improper of them to arrive at my place of employment and insist on seeing me while I was there. Regretfully, they did precisely that 3 days ago. Seeing them after all this time was really odd. The receptionist told me that my family was waiting outside when they arrived, even though I was working. I initially assumed she was referring to my wife and kid, which would have been strange given that my son was at school and my wife was at work. She went on to say that my sister and parents were present to see me. I was having trouble processing what was happening at the time. I informed the receptionist that they would have to be ordered to go for the time being, but I would see them later. Naturally, they persisted and were making a scene, so I had to step in. Before I could talk to them and find out what was going on, I didn't want security to eject them from the premises. I therefore walked to the lobby to see them. They immediately pretended that nothing had changed in the over 2 decades since I had last seen them. They started praising me right away, telling me how wonderful it was that I had achieved enough accomplishment to make the headlines and how motivational my tale was. They should have been included in that story as members of my family, so hearing them say it felt odd. They began discussing how they had seen my family, but I tried to dismiss it by telling them I had to return to work. I had mentioned in my interview how helpful my wife and son had been to me along the way. They were referring to certain family images that were also featured on the channel. Since they had been away from us for a while, they began to express a wish to meet my wife and their grandson as soon as possible. At that point, they said I should have done more to reach out to them after the divorce and chastised me for not trying hard enough. It dawned on me that I might at last be able to find out what had transpired at that time. Therefore, rather than telling them to leave, I chose to let them speak. In an attempt to find some closure, I even sat down with them in the lobby. During their conversation, I learned the true reason my family had deserted me and why Amy had chosen to divorce me. Yes, Amy had been cheating on me, as you may have surmised by now. My parents had been helping her hide it the entire time, so I had never suspected it. However, they stated that they had their reasons, or at least, those they believed to be legitimate, so don't pass judgment too hastily. Amy had apparently been having an affair with my cousin, who was the son of my dad's older brother. Everything made sense when they eventually told me. I now saw why they had supported her, why I hadn't received an invitation to any family gatherings for the previous 20 years, and why I had been rejected without any fault of my own. I had never liked my cousin, let's call him Carl, since he was a rude, entitled brat. Unfortunately, his father and the rest of the family felt he should be given a free pass for everything because his mother had died when he was only 6 months old. No one ever told him how to act throughout his life, and he consistently got away with anything. The fact that my uncle, Carl's father, was my dad's supervisor and had founded the family business before my dad joined it didn't help either. When Carl decided he wanted to be with Amy after we were married and she agreed, my family felt compelled to support them. They couldn't take the chance of upsetting my uncle. But apparently it was easy for them to decide to risk their friendship with me. They did precisely that. They also informed me that my uncle made it very apparent during the divorce that he did not want any family members, including my parents and sister, to communicate with me in any way. After Amy said she was expecting my child, they apparently attempted to object. They would have to cut me off if they ever wished to communicate with their grandson. In addition, when Amy filed for divorce, I was never informed that she was expecting a child. I couldn't have predicted because she hadn't been displaying at the time either. She had moved out long before the divorce was finalized, so she hadn't been living with me. Therefore, even before my son was born, I was unaware that I had become a father. It seems that my daughter, who is now almost 20, believes Carl is her biological father even though she has never met me. In any case, my parents told me this about what actually occurred all those years ago. It felt like I was being told a story, and I was hardly able to process any of it at the time. To acknowledge that this was my reality, I had to pinch myself. My family thought that by achieving job security and establishing a bond with their granddaughter, they had effectively cut me off. They had cut me off because, in my opinion, they were simply cowards. They could have simply told me the truth and let me deal with it, but instead they decided to be scared of my dad's brother, acting as though he could do more than just drive my father out of the family business. My dad could have taken legal action in retaliation even at that point. I honestly can't think of a reason why you didn't notify me about Amy's pregnancy or the fact that I have a daughter. They sat on this for 20 years without saying anything until they realized I was doing well in life. They suddenly felt a great deal of pity for everything and wanted to make amends with me. Sadly for them, I was able to see through their deception. I told them I needed them to go as soon as they were done telling me everything because I didn't have the capacity to forgive them right now after what they had just told me. Since we were seated in my workplace's lobby and I didn't want to start a fight, I made an effort to be polite. I couldn't, however, rely on others to act similarly. As soon as I told them to go, they began complaining that I should consider their point of view and how challenging the situation had been for them as well. I informed them that I was positive they were only contacting me now because they wanted a share of my success. They strongly rejected it. My sister even went so far as to argue that they were the reason I was successful in the first place, as they had come up with the name for my restaurant back when it was still just a dream. Given that they hadn't helped me over the years and that I had created everything on my own with the assistance of my friends rather than them, I thought it was rather brave of her to make such a claim. It wasn't enough for them to claim credit for my accomplishment just because they suggested a name. I laughed at her because the idea was so ridiculous. I threatened to have her and my parents ejected from the building if they didn't leave right away. They persisted in their argument, stating that they would not go until we had resolved our differences. But I was not interested in carrying on the discussion. I therefore carried out my promise and had security eject them from the building. As they were being led away, they were obviously very unhappy and tried attempting to convince me that they had no other option. However, I don't believe that. They had an option, but they chose poorly, and now they will have to live with the repercussions. They have survived the previous 20 years without seeing me or my family, so I have no doubt that they will be able to do the same in the future. In any case, they haven't stopped attempting to get in touch with me 3 days after this happened. They haven't had the guts to return inside my workplace, but they have been showing up outside, sending emails to my work address, and texting me on social media. Their attitude has clearly changed as seen by the numerous apologies in their mails. They appear somewhat agitated as they wait for me to stop for them outside my place of employment. However, I ignore them and simply drive past. I almost feel sorry for them now because of how horrible things have gone. To be honest, I've discussed this with my wife because, no matter what I do about my family, we still need to consider my daughter, whom I was unaware of until a few days ago. We have been debating whether or not to track down my daughter and attempt to get in touch with her. We also have to deal with my family, who I don't think will leave until they have another opportunity to talk to me. My wife believes that perhaps I should invite them over and have a conversation with them in order to at least try to resolve the issue. Since this circumstance isn't healthy for my emotional health, she thinks it might help get rid of all the toxicity. But I'm not personally interested in doing it. Given everything I've learned and what I'm going through right now, I don't have the mental capacity to deal with them, so I just want to keep ignoring them till they go away. We are struggling greatly to decide how to proceed and handle this. After 20 years of no communication, I also question whether I'm wrong for not wanting to give my parents another chance to talk. Update 1. A week and 3 days have passed since my initial post, and my spouse and I have made the decision to keep ignoring my relatives. Fortunately, they haven't been showing up to my place of employment for the previous several days. This is most likely due to their fatigue or fear of security. In any case, I'm glad. It was much simpler for me to quit thinking about them after they stopped visiting. It appears that I was feeling guilty about how I was handling the matter because of their presence. I no longer feel bad about not responding to their texts. No matter how many times they apologize, nothing will change. No amount of apologies will make up for the fact that they have failed me as a family. I'm not even bothering to block them anymore, even though they've kept sending messages from different accounts and email addresses. What's the point? I'll continue to ignore them even if they try to apologize by making new accounts. We'll see how long they can continue this. Let's go on to the other problem we are facing, my daughter. Neither my wife nor I knew how to handle the matter. My parents told me where she attends college throughout our talk, so we have her name. I haven't taken any action yet, but my assistant was able to locate her social media profiles. I am unsure of if it is appropriate for me to contact her, and I'm unsure of how to inform her that I am her biological father. I can't just walk up to Amy's house and demand custody or anything because she's not a kid. Furthermore, given what I've learned about Amy, I'd prefer not to have her involved in this at all. I no longer have any regard for that woman or my family as a whole because they are all cowards with no courage, and I don't want anything to do with them. I can't say the same for my kid though. She is still my biological daughter, regardless of who reared her. Please let me know if you have any suggestions about how to approach her or if I should even be doing this. I also want to thank everyone who left a remark on my first post. I hope you can help me again because your advice has been incredibly useful. Update 2. My wife and I made the decision to move ahead after reading the comments on my last update. Waiting for the ideal moment or chance to get in touch with my daughter was pointless. We had to remove the band-aid and finish the job. We thought it wouldn't be appropriate to fly out to her because she lives in a different state, so we chose to message her first and see how things work out. We messaged her on Instagram and gave her the most polite explanation possible. We are merely awaiting a response at this time. She will undoubtedly find it difficult to accept, just as it is for me. The fact that my wife has been so understanding of my efforts to reconnect with my long-lost kid from my previous marriage is beyond me. We're trying our best, but I'm sure it's bringing up a lot of complex feelings for all of us. I would love to establish a relationship with my daughter, therefore I sincerely hope she responds. My parents haven't visited my place of employment in a long time. They wrote me a lengthy email yesterday in which they expressed their sincere regret for everything and their want to mend our friendship. They only required one opportunity. Additionally, they indicated they would wait for me to get in touch with them before contacting me again. To be honest, I'm a little relieved that they finally understood that I don't want to talk to them at this time. The last thing I need is for them to add additional drama to my already full plate. All I can hope for now is that they follow through on their promise and don't get in touch with me again. I will talk to them myself if I feel ready or want to at any time. But at this point, it doesn't appear probable that this will occur anytime soon. The situation has only gotten worse now that I know the true reason they haven't spoken to me in 20 years. I don't think the feeling of betrayal and hurt will go away anytime soon. There was at least one positive outcome from this. I learned more about my daughter, and I'm hoping she will choose to give our relationship another shot. In case she doesn't want to speak with us, I haven't yet told my kid about her. I don't want to give him unrealistic expectations. But if everything works out, he might see her as a sister, and I might meet the daughter I never knew I had. Right now, I'm feeling a lot of different emotions, and I'm making a lot of effort to control them. Update 3. I made contact with my daughter on social media approximately 2 weeks ago. I messaged her, telling her everything about myself and our relationship. I finally got a response today after waiting for 2 weeks. She only mentioned that she had discussed me with her mother and that she had discovered that I am her biological father. She was shocked by this, of course. She had no notion that she wasn't Carl's daughter and had thought he was her biological father for the last 20 years. She also told me that she wanted to see me and my family after learning the real tale of how her mother and I got to be this way. Since she doesn't have the money to visit us at this time and isn't talking to her family, we are taking a plane to see her this weekend. She didn't go into too much detail, but Amy first attempted to deny the message when she challenged her about it. But in the end, she had to be honest with her. Since I don't want to talk to Amy, I sincerely hope she doesn't get in touch with me. I haven't heard from her yet. When my family learned that I had contacted my daughter, they promptly betrayed their word and began attempting to speak with me. My uncle was obviously upset that I found out, and rightfully so, as they had worked for 20 years to make sure I never found out so that their lives wouldn't be disturbed. I've learned that my uncle is blaming my parents. My dad still fears his older brother, despite the fact that he no longer works for him and owns his own company. He has been pleading with me to explain that neither Carl nor my uncle were involved in my discovery, but I fail to understand the purpose. They are the only ones who could have maintained such a secret, so even if I did, I doubt anyone would believe me. The majority of my family has never been close to me, and they haven't bothered to talk to me in 20 years. It's amusing how frantic they are right now to keep their friendship with my uncle intact. But to be honest, I don't give a damn. I lost out on 20 years of a relationship with my daughter because of them. This, I believe, is the least I can do. Update 4. I finally got to meet my kid today with my family. It was initially uncomfortable, then moved, but overall it was simply lovely. Despite having grown up with two of the worst people I've ever met, she seems to be a decent and caring person. She is a very mature and clever young woman, whether it is due to her natural disposition or to the fact that they raised her well. During our lengthy talk, we discussed Amy and Carl's situation. She told me that she didn't care that they didn't approve of her meeting us. She doesn't care what her folks think now that she knows the truth. She doesn't intend to eliminate Amy and Carl from her life entirely because they don't have any other children but her, but she will undoubtedly put them out of her life for a while as she tries to come to terms with everything. She informed me that she also needed time to begin developing a relationship with me. I completely understand that she's in a really strange mental state at the moment. She seemed to get along well with my wife and her half-brother, and we had a great day overall. During supper, we discovered that my parents, who are her grandparents, had maintained communication with her throughout the entire time. Given that they were her grandfather's brother's family rather than her biological grandparents, she always thought it was odd how sentimental they were about her. Now they understand why they were so devoted to her. But now that she has learned all of this, she and I both view them differently. Since I'm a lot older than her, I can probably relate to her feelings, but not totally. Having been deceived by those she thought were closest to her throughout her life, she is just 20 years old and is likely finding it much more difficult to cope. In any case, we will both need to work on this, and maybe things will improve in the future. We're going to make an effort to make it the greatest it can be, so I know it must be. The fact that the meeting went well and that my family and I both seem satisfied after everything makes me very happy. No matter what Carl, Amy, or my family have done, I'm also rather happy with the situation. The important thing is that we finally have an opportunity to put things right after all these years, and I'm going to take advantage of it.
Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.